The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany conference table as Lieutenant Colonel Diane Vargas stood at rigid attention. Around her, 24 senior military officials shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, their medals catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Potomac River. The silence was deafening. 4-star General William Blackstone entered the room, his imposing 6-foot frame commanding immediate respect. His steel-gray hair was perfectly groomed, his uniform immaculate, bearing ribbons from 3 decades of distinguished service. But Diane's eyes weren't focused on his decorations. They were fixed on the manila folder in her trembling hands, a folder containing evidence that would either vindicate her suspicions or destroy her military career forever. At ease, General Blackstone commanded, his voice echoing off the oak-paneled walls of the secure conference room at Joint Base Andrews. Every officer relaxed their stance except Diane, who remained locked in position, her jaw set with determination. What General Blackstone didn't know was that Diane had spent the last 6 months uncovering a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of military command. What she had discovered would shake the very foundations of American military leadership and expose a fatal mistake that had already cost lives, and would cost many more if she didn't act now. The question wasn't whether she had the courage to speak. The question was whether anyone would believe her when she did. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 months earlier, Captain Diane Vargas sat in the sterile fluorescent-lit archives of the Pentagon's Historical Division, surrounded by towers of classified documents that stretched from floor to ceiling. As the military's youngest senior intelligence analyst, she had been tasked with conducting a routine review of recent overseas operations, what the brass called a lessons learned assessment. It was supposed to be mundane work, the kind of assignment given to promising officers to keep them busy between more significant postings. Diane had always been methodical in her approach to intelligence work. Where others saw scattered data points, she saw patterns. Where others found coincidences, she discovered connections. It was this analytical mind that had earned her early promotion and the attention of senior leadership. But it was also this same relentless attention to detail that was about to uncover something that would change everything. The operation files spread across her desk told the story of Operation Desert Shield, a supposedly successful counter-terrorism mission in the mountains of northern Syria. According to the official reports, American Special Forces had eliminated a high-value terrorist target and captured significant intelligence assets. The mission had been hailed as a textbook example of precision warfare with minimal civilian casualties and maximum strategic impact. But as Diane dove deeper into the supporting documents, inconsistencies began to emerge. Radio transcripts didn't match the timeline in the official after-action reports. Satellite imagery showed civilian vehicles in the target area that weren't mentioned in any of the briefings. Most troubling of all, the medical evacuation records indicated casualties that didn't appear in any official documentation. Diane pulled out a detailed map of the operational area and began cross-referencing coordinates from different sources. The target building, according to the intelligence briefing, was supposed to be an isolated terrorist safe house. But when she overlaid the satellite imagery with local infrastructure maps, a chilling picture began to emerge. The building wasn't isolated at all. It was part of a small village that housed nearly 200 civilians, including a school and a medical clinic. Her hands shook as she reached for another file, this one containing communications intercepts from the night of the operation. The radio chatter painted a very different picture from the sanitized version in the official reports. She could hear the confusion in the voices of the Special Forces operators as they realized they weren't hitting a terrorist safe house but a civilian compound. She could hear the panic as they called for immediate medical evacuation for wounded non-combatants. "Control, we have multiple civilian casualties," came the crackling voice of Master Sergeant David Thompson, the team leader. "On the ground. The intelligence was wrong. This isn't a terrorist facility, it's a village." The response from command was chilling in its calculation. Maintain operational security. Complete the mission as briefed. Rebecca sat back in her chair, her mind racing through the implications. Someone had known this was a civilian target. Someone had ordered the operation to proceed anyway. And someone had then covered up the truth about what really happened that night. She pulled up the original intelligence briefing that had justified the operation. The source was listed as Human Asset Bravo 7, described as a high-level informant within terrorist networks. But as Rebecca traced the intelligence through the system, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Asset Bravo 7 had been compromised and turned by enemy forces 6 months before Operation Desert Shield. The intelligence community knew the source was unreliable, yet the information had been used anyway to justify the mission. Rebecca's computer chimed with an encrypted message. She opened it to find a communication from Dr. Sarah Williams, a Red Cross physician, who had been working in the region during the time of the operation. Dr. Williams had been trying for months to get someone in the military to listen to her account of what had happened that night. "Lieutenant Colonel Martinez," the message read, "I understand you're reviewing Operation Desert Shield. I was at the medical clinic in Al-Rashid village when your forces attacked. What happened there wasn't a counter-terrorism operation, it was a massacre. 18 civilians died, including 6 children. The man you were targeting, Halil Hassan, wasn't a terrorist. He was a schoolteacher who had been trying to negotiate peace between rival tribal factions. Someone fed your people false intelligence, and innocent people died because of it." Rebecca stared at the message, her worst fears confirmed. But as she continued reading, Dr. Williams revealed something even more disturbing. "Lieutenant Colonel, I've been trying to get this information to the proper authorities for months, but every time I submit a report, it disappears into the bureaucracy. I've been threatened, my communications have been monitored, and I've been told to stop asking questions. But I can't stop, because I know that the same false intelligence network that led to Al-Rashid is still active. They're planning another operation, and if someone doesn't expose the truth, more innocent people are going to die." Rebecca's hands trembled as she reached for her secure phone. She needed to verify Dr. Williams' account independently, but she also knew that her investigation was about to move from routine analysis into dangerous territory. Someone had deliberately used false intelligence to justify an operation that killed civilians, and that same someone was still in a position to do it again. She spent the next several hours pulling classified medical records, casualty reports, and intelligence assessments from the night of Operation Desert Shield. What she found painted a picture of systematic deception that reached the highest levels of military command. The operation had been planned and executed based on intelligence that senior officials knew was compromised. The civilian casualties had been covered up through falsified reports and suppressed medical records. And most disturbing of all, the pattern of deception suggested that Al-Rashid wasn't an isolated incident. Diane opened a new file on her secure workstation and began documenting everything she had discovered. As she worked, she realized that she was potentially uncovering the biggest military scandal since Abu Ghraib. But she also knew that the people responsible for the cover-up were still in positions of power, still making decisions that affected the lives of soldiers and civilians alike. Her investigation led her to a series of classified communications between senior military officials in the days following Operation Desert Shield. The exchanges revealed a deliberate effort to suppress information about civilian casualties and to discredit anyone who tried to report the truth. But more chilling were the references to maintaining operational flexibility and protecting strategic assets, language that suggested the false Intelligence network was being preserved for future use. As Diane dug deeper into the communications, one name kept appearing: General William Blackstone. At the time of Operation Desert Shield, he had been a colonel serving as Deputy Director of Military Intelligence. The communications showed that he had been personally involved in vetting the intelligence for the operation and had signed off on using Asset Bravo 7 despite knowing the source was compromised. But General Blackstone's involvement went deeper than just approving bad intelligence. Diane discovered that he had been instrumental in crafting the cover-up that followed the operation. He had personally ordered the suppression of casualty reports and had threatened medical personnel who tried to report the truth about what happened at Al-Rashid. The most damning evidence came in the form of a classified memo from General Blackstone to his superiors, written 3 days after the operation. In it, he acknowledged that the intelligence had been false and that civilian casualties had occurred. But he argued that revealing the truth would damage American credibility and operational security. He recommended that the incident be classified at the highest levels and that all personnel involved be reassigned to prevent further inquiry. Diane realized that she was looking at evidence of a war crime and its subsequent cover-up, orchestrated by an officer who was now one of the most powerful generals in the American military. But she also knew that making such accusations would require irrefutable proof and would likely end her career, regardless of whether she was proven right or wrong. As she prepared to dig deeper into General Blackstone's role in the conspiracy, Diane's secure terminal chimed with an urgent message from Dr. Williams. When she opened it, her blood went cold. "Lieutenant Colonel Vargas, I've just received intelligence from my contacts in Syria. The same network that provided false information about Al-Rashid is active again. They're feeding intelligence about a new target, a supposed terrorist training camp near the Turkish border. But my sources tell me it's actually a refugee camp housing over 300 displaced families. The operation is scheduled for next week, and it's being planned by the same people who were responsible for Al-Rashid. You're the only person in a position to stop this from happening again." Diane stared at the message, realizing that her investigation had suddenly become a race against time. She had uncovered evidence of past war crimes, but now she had to prevent future ones. And the only way to do that was to confront the most powerful general in the American military with evidence of his fatal mistake. A mistake that had already cost innocent lives and was about to cost many more. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Diane's fingers trembled as she saved Dr. Williams' message to her encrypted files. The weight of what she had discovered pressed down on her like a physical force. She wasn't just looking at evidence of past crimes anymore. She was facing an imminent threat to hundreds of innocent lives. But before she could act, she needed more proof, something so undeniable that even General Blackstone's considerable influence couldn't suppress it. She began by pulling every classified file related to Asset Bravo 7. What she found was a systematic pattern of deception that stretched back years. The asset had been compromised not just once, but multiple times. Yet his intelligence continued to be used to justify high-stakes military operations. Each time concerns were raised about his reliability, they were dismissed by the same small group of senior officials who all reported directly to Colonel Blackstone. As he had been at the time, the pattern was methodical and chilling. Operation Thunderstrike in Iraq. Intelligence from Bravo 7 led to a raid on what was supposed to be a weapons depot, but turned out to be a water treatment facility. 12 civilians killed. Operation Silent Arrow in Afghanistan. Bravo 7's information resulted in the bombing of what intelligence claimed was a terrorist training camp, but was actually a wedding celebration. 23 dead, including the bride and groom. Operation Desert Shield was just the latest in a series of mistakes that weren't mistakes at all. Diane discovered that after each incident, the same protocol was followed. Initial reports would mention civilian casualties, but within days, revised reports would emerge, minimizing the numbers and claiming the deaths were the result of enemy action rather than intelligence failures. Medical personnel who tried to report accurate casualty figures found themselves reassigned to remote postings. Journalists who asked too many questions had their access revoked. Investigators who pressed too hard suddenly found their security clearances under review. The mastermind behind this systematic cover-up was always the same: Colonel William Blackstone, who had used each successful operation to advance his career while burying the evidence of innocent lives lost. But Diane needed more than patterns and circumstantial evidence. She needed documents, communications, and testimony that would be impossible to dismiss or discredit. She began reaching out through secure channels to personnel who had been involved in the operations, particularly those who had been reassigned or forced out of the military after raising concerns. Her first breakthrough came from Master Sergeant David Thompson, the team leader from Operation Desert Shield, who had tried to report the civilian casualties. Thompson had been quietly transferred to a logistics posting in Alaska after filing his report about al-Rashid. When Diane contacted him through encrypted channels, he was initially reluctant to speak. Lieutenant Colonel, Thompson's message read, "I tried to do the right thing once before, and it nearly destroyed my career. My family and I have been threatened. My wife lost her job. My kids had to change schools because of harassment. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" Diane's response was immediate. "Sergeant, I understand the risks, but 300 people are about to die if we don't act. I need your help to prevent another al-Rashid." Thompson's next message contained audio recordings he had made during and after Operation Desert Shield, recordings that painted a devastating picture of the operation and its aftermath. The most damning was a conversation between Thompson and his commanding officer immediately after the raid. "Sir, we need to report the civilian casualties accurately." Thompson's voice came through clearly on the recording. "The official count doesn't match what we saw on the ground." The commanding officer's response was chilling. "Sergeant, you'll report exactly what's in the official briefing. Colonel Blackstone has made it clear that operational security requires us to minimize any negative publicity. The mission was a success, and that's what the record will show." "But sir, there were children." "The conversation is over, Sergeant. You follow orders, or you find yourself explaining your lack of loyalty to a court-martial board." Diane realized she was listening to evidence of a direct order to falsify casualty reports, given in Colonel Blackstone's name, but she needed more. She reached out to Dr. Williams, asking for any additional documentation from her time in Syria. Dr. Williams' response exceeded Diane's expectations. She had kept meticulous records of her treatment of casualties from American military operations, including detailed medical reports, photographs of injuries, and interviews with survivors. But more importantly, she had continued investigating the intelligence network responsible for the false information. "Lieutenant Colonel Vargas," Dr. Williams wrote, "I've spent the last 2 years tracking the source of the false intelligence that led to al-Rashid and the other incidents. What I've discovered is that Asset Bravo 7 wasn't just compromised, he was deliberately turned and is being used as part of a larger disinformation campaign. The goal isn't just to cause civilian casualties. It's to destabilize American military operations in the region while giving certain officials plausible deniability." Dr. Williams had uncovered a conspiracy that went beyond simple cover-ups. Asset Bravo 7 was being used by enemy forces to feed false intelligence that would cause maximum damage to American credibility, while advancing the careers of the officials who appeared to be acting on good intelligence. Each failed operation served multiple purposes. It eliminated American allies on the ground, turned local populations against American forces, and created chaos that enemy forces could exploit. The most shocking revelation was that General Blackstone wasn't just covering up intelligence failures. He was actively participating in a scheme that sacrificed American lives and credibility for personal advancement. Dr. Williams had intercepted communications suggesting that Blackstone had been promised a position with a major defense contractor after his military service, contingent on his cooperation in destabilizing American operations in the region. Diane's investigation took on new urgency when she discovered that the upcoming operation against the refugee camp was part of a larger plan. According to Dr. Williams' intelligence, it was designed to trigger a massive refugee crisis that would overwhelm Turkish border facilities and create the pretext for a Russian military intervention in the region. The civilian casualties would be blamed on faulty intelligence, but the strategic outcome would advance Russian interests while eliminating American influence. But Diane needed proof that would stand up in a military court and be impossible for General Blackstone to suppress or discredit. She began searching for financial records that might show payments to Blackstone or evidence of his promised post-military employment. What she found was a web of consulting contracts, speaking fees, and stock options that painted a picture of systematic corruption. Through her security clearance, Diane accessed financial intelligence reports that showed large payments to shell companies associated with Blackstone's family members. The payments always came shortly after operations, based on Asset Bravo 7's intelligence, regardless of whether the operations were successful or resulted in civilian casualties. The pattern suggested that Blackstone was being paid not for successful operations, but for operations that served enemy interests while maintaining American plausible deniability. The evidence was overwhelming, but Diane knew that presenting it would be the most dangerous moment of her career. She was preparing to accuse a four-star general of treason, war crimes, and conspiracy with enemy forces. Even with irrefutable evidence, the accusation would make her a target for elimination by forces that had already killed Dr. Williams' colleagues and threatened Master Sergeant Thompson's family. Diane spent the next week carefully documenting every piece of evidence and creating multiple encrypted copies stored in secure locations. She prepared a comprehensive briefing that laid out the entire conspiracy, from the initial compromise of Asset Bravo 7 to the planned operation against the refugee camp. But she also knew that presenting the evidence wouldn't be enough. She needed to ensure that the upcoming operation was stopped and that General Blackstone couldn't simply transfer her to a remote posting or have her security clearance revoked. Her solution was bold and risky. She would demand a formal briefing before the Joint Chiefs of Staff, ostensibly to present her findings about Operation Desert Shield. Once in the room with the highest levels of military leadership, she would present her evidence not just about past crimes, but about the imminent threat to the refugee camp. With witnesses present, General Blackstone wouldn't be able to simply suppress her report or have her silenced. But first, she needed to ensure her safety and the safety of those who had helped her. She arranged for copies of all her evidence to be automatically sent to multiple news organizations and congressional oversight committees if she failed to check in at regular intervals. She also contacted a military lawyer she trusted, briefing him on the situation and ensuring that he would be prepared to represent her if she was arrested or court-martialed. The night before she was scheduled to present her findings, Diane received a final message from Dr. Williams that made her blood run cold. The operation against the refugee camp had been moved up by 48 hours. It was scheduled to begin in less than 24 hours, which meant her briefing to the Joint Chiefs might come too late to save the 300 innocent lives at stake. Diane realized she had no choice but to take the most dangerous gamble of her career. She would have to confront General Blackstone directly in front of his peers with evidence of his crimes. She would have to challenge the most powerful general in the American military and expose his fatal mistake before he could make it again. As she prepared for what might be the last briefing of her career, Diane thought about the 18 civilians who had died at Al-Rashid, the hundreds of others who had died in similar operations, and the 300 refugees who would die if she failed. The evidence was clear. The stakes were life and death, and the moment of truth was finally at hand. The morning of the briefing arrived with unseasonably cold weather that matched the chill in Diane's bones. She had spent the night reviewing her evidence one final time, knowing that once she walked into that conference room, there would be no turning back. Her secure phone had been buzzing with encrypted messages from Dr. Williams, each one more urgent than the last. The refugee camp operation had been confirmed for 1,400 hours, just 6 hours after her scheduled briefing. Diane arrived at Joint Base Andrews 30 minutes early, using the extra time to make copies of her most critical evidence and place them in sealed envelopes to be hand-delivered to key members of Congress if the briefing went badly. She had learned from studying General Blackstone's methods that the first response to damaging evidence was always to discredit the messenger and suppress the information. She wasn't going to let that happen. The conference room was already buzzing with activity when she arrived. Besides General Blackstone, the assembled officials included Admiral Patricia Chun, Chief of Naval Operations, General Robert Hayes, Army Chief of Staff, General Michelle Rodriguez, Air Force Chief of Staff, and General Thomas Anderson, Commandant of the Marine Corps. These were some of the most powerful military leaders in the world, and Diane was about to accuse one of their peers of treason. Colonel James Morrison, General Blackstone's aide-de-camp, approached her as she set up her briefing materials. "Lieutenant Colonel Vargas, the General wanted me to remind you that this is a preliminary review of Operation Desert Shield. He expects your presentation to focus on lessons learned and operational improvements, not on rehashing settled matters." Diane met Morrison's gaze steadily. "Colonel, I understand the parameters of my briefing. I believe the Joint Chiefs will find my findings ... illuminating." Morrison's expression suggested he sensed something was different about this briefing, but he simply nodded and took his seat near General Blackstone. Diane noticed that Blackstone had positioned himself strategically in the room, with clear sight lines to all exits and close proximity to the emergency communication systems. Even now, he was thinking tactically. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Chun called the meeting to order. "Lieutenant Colonel Vargas will be presenting her analysis of Operation Desert Shield. Colonel Vargas, you have the floor." Diane stood and walked to the front of the room, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Thank you, Admiral Chun. Generals, what I'm about to present to you isn't just an analysis of Operation Desert Shield. It's evidence of a systematic conspiracy that has cost American and civilian lives, compromised our national security, and is about to result in a catastrophic intelligence failure that will occur in less than 6 hours." The room fell silent. General Blackstone's face darkened, but he remained seated, clearly calculating his response. Admiral Chun leaned forward. "That's a serious accusation, Colonel. I trust you have substantial evidence to support such claims." "I do, Admiral." Diane activated the room's secure display system and began presenting her evidence methodically. She started with the financial records showing payments to Blackstone's associates, then moved to the audio recordings from Master Sergeant Thompson, and finally presented Dr. Williams' documentation of the civilian casualties. As she spoke, she watched the faces of the Joint Chiefs. General Hayes appeared shocked, Admiral Chun looked increasingly angry, and General Rodriguez was taking detailed notes. But it was General Anderson's reaction that surprised her most. He didn't look shocked at all. He looked like a man who was finally seeing confirmation of suspicions he'd held for a long time. "These are fabricated documents," General Blackstone interjected, standing abruptly. "Lieutenant Colonel Vargas has clearly suffered some kind of psychological break. I recommend she be immediately relieved of duty and subjected to a full psychiatric evaluation." "Sit down, William." Admiral Chun's voice cut through the room like a blade. Let her finish her presentation. Diane continued, presenting the evidence of Asset Bravo 7's compromise and the pattern of operations that followed his false intelligence. When she reached the part about the upcoming refugee camp operation, General Anderson suddenly spoke up. "Colonel Vargas, you mentioned an operation scheduled for today. Are you referring to Operation Silent Thunder?" Diane's blood ran cold. She hadn't mentioned the operation's name in her briefing. "Yes, sir." "How did you?" "Because I've been conducting my own investigation into unusual intelligence patterns," Anderson said grimly. "And I've been trying to get this operation postponed for the last 48 hours based on concerns about source reliability." General Blackstone's face had gone pale. "Tom, you're out of line. Operation Silent Thunder is based on solid intelligence from multiple sources. Is it, William?" Anderson pulled out his own folder. "Because my investigation shows that all of those multiple sources trace back to the same compromised asset that Colonel Vargas has been investigating." The room erupted. Admiral Chun was demanding explanations. General Hayes was reviewing Diane's evidence on his tablet. And General Rodriguez was already on her secure phone, apparently ordering a halt to Operation Silent Thunder. "But General," Blackstone wasn't finished. "This is a coordinated attack on military leadership," he declared, his voice rising. "Vargas has been in contact with foreign agents posing as humanitarian workers. She's been fed disinformation designed to undermine American military operations. I have evidence that she's been compromised." Diane felt her heart skip a beat. Blackstone was trying to turn the tables, to make her the traitor instead of himself. But she had prepared for this possibility. "General Blackstone," she said calmly, "if I've been compromised, then please explain how I knew about the financial transactions between Meridian Defense Consulting and shell companies owned by your Kio brother-in-law. Transactions that occurred within 48 hours of each operation, based on Asset Bravo 7's intelligence." The silence that followed was deafening. General Blackstone's face went from pale to red as he realized that Diane had evidence he hadn't expected her to find. "Furthermore," Diane continued, "if I've been compromised, please explain how I obtained recordings of your conversations with Marcus Webb from Webb Strategic Solutions, where you discussed your post-military employment contingent on maintaining operational flexibility in current assignments." Diane felt sick. Even with Blackstone in custody, the conspiracy was still active, still dangerous. "Dr. Williams, what's the target?" "The American diplomatic compound in Erbil, Iraq. Intelligence suggests the attack is planned for tomorrow night, during a scheduled diplomatic reception. Over 200 American and allied personnel will be in the compound, including several high-ranking officials who are flying in for emergency strategy session about the Blackstone crisis." Admiral Chun immediately began coordinating with her staff to alert the compound and arrange additional security. But Diane realized that simply defending against the attack wouldn't be enough. The enemy network would continue to operate, continue to plan attacks, continue to manipulate intelligence until every part of their operation was exposed and dismantled. "Admiral," Diane said, "we need to do more than just protect the compound. We need to capture the operatives who are planning the attack. If we can get them alive, we can unravel the entire network." "Colonel, that's incredibly dangerous." "We're talking about going after professional killers who are already planning to eliminate you." "Yes, ma'am, but it's the only way to end this. As long as the network remains intact, they'll keep trying to manipulate our intelligence, keep trying to stage attacks, keep trying to turn American military operations against innocent people." General Anderson, who had been coordinating with intelligence agencies, looked up from his tablet. "Colonel Vargas has a point. We've identified at least 3 other intelligence assets who appear to be compromised. If we don't act aggressively to dismantle the network, we'll be dealing with this problem for years." Admiral Chun considered the options. "What are you proposing, Colonel?" "I want to volunteer as bait," Diane said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. "The enemy network knows I'm the one who exposed Blackstone. They'll want to eliminate me personally. If we can make them think I'm vulnerable, we can draw them into a trap." "Absolutely not," Admiral Chun replied immediately. "I'm not sending an intelligence officer into a situation where she's deliberately exposed to assassination. Admiral, with respect, I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for support. The network is going to come after me anyway. The question is whether we use that to our advantage or whether we just wait for them to choose the time and place." "Doctor." William's voice came through the secure phone again. "Lieutenant Colonel, I understand what you're thinking, but these people are professionals. They've killed intelligence operatives, diplomats, and military officers. They won't hesitate to kill you, Dr. Williams. They're going to kill me anyway if we don't stop them. At least this way, we can use my situation to protect others and gather intelligence about their operations." General Anderson stood up abruptly. "There might be another way. Colonel Vargas, what if we let them think their assassination attempt succeeded? What if we fake your death and then use that to infiltrate their network?" The idea was audacious, but Diane could see the logic. If the enemy network believed she was dead, they might lower their guard and reveal more about their operations. "That could work, sir, but it would require perfect coordination and timing. It would also require you to disappear completely," Admiral Chun added. "No contact with family, no normal life, no identity beyond what we create for the operation. Are you prepared for that?" Diane thought about her sister in California, her parents in Texas, the life she had built outside of the military. The plan would require her to give up everything she had known, to become someone else entirely. But she also thought about the 18 civilians who had died at al-Rashid, the 300 refugees who had almost been killed at the border camp, and the 200 American personnel who were about to be targeted in Erbil. "I'll do it," she said simply. Admiral Chun studied her for a long moment. "Colonel, I need you to understand that this isn't just about risking your life. This is about potentially spending years undercover, living a lie, with no guarantee that you'll ever be able to return to your normal life." "Admiral, I stopped having a normal life the moment I discovered what General Blackstone was doing. If I can prevent more innocent people from dying, if I can help dismantle a network that's been manipulating American intelligence for years, then the sacrifice is worth it." "There's one more thing," Dr. Williams interjected. "If we're going to do this, we need to move quickly. My sources indicate that the assassination team is already in position. They're planning to move against you within the next 12 hours. Admiral Chun made her decision. Colonel Vargas, you're officially dead as of right now. General Anderson, coordinate with the CIA and Special Operations Command. We're going to stage the most convincing assassination in military history. And then we're going to use it to destroy the network that's been trying to destroy us." As the Joint Chiefs began coordinating what would become one of the most complex counterintelligence operations in American history, Diane realized that her investigation had evolved into something far beyond what she had imagined. She had started by trying to prevent a single military operation, but she had uncovered a conspiracy that threatened the very foundation of American intelligence operations. Woman who had walked into the Pentagon archives 3 months ago as a routine intelligence analyst was about to disappear forever. In her place would emerge someone new, someone who would infiltrate the enemy network from within and ensure that the truth about American military operations would never again be compromised by those who would sacrifice innocent lives for personal gain. The real war was just beginning. The safe house in rural Virginia looked like any other suburban home: white picket fence, manicured lawn, children's bicycles in the driveway. But beneath its ordinary facade lay one of the CIA's most sophisticated identity transformation facilities, where Lieutenant Colonel Diane Vargas was about to cease to exist. CIA Operative Marcus, Reed studied the surveillance photos spread across the kitchen table. The assassination team arrived in Washington 6 hours ago, he reported, his voice matter-of-fact despite the gravity of the situation. 3 professionals: Petra Volkov, former Spetsnaz; Ahmed Hassan, Syrian intelligence; and someone we only know as the mechanic, suspected of eliminating at least 12 Western operatives over the past 5 years. Diane examined the photos, memorizing faces that belonged to people who wanted her dead. Volkov was a blonde woman in her 30s with dead eyes and military bearing. Hassan appeared to be in his 40s, distinguished-looking enough to pass for a diplomat or businessman. The mechanic's photo was grainy, taken from a distance, showing only a tall figure in a dark coat. How do they plan to do it? Admiral Chun asked from her position near the window, where she maintained watch over the quiet suburban street. Car bomb is most likely, Reed replied. Hassan is an explosives expert, and they've been tracking Colonel Vargas's movements for the past 48 hours. They know she drives the same route to work every morning, parks in the same spot in the Pentagon parking garage. The plan is simple, effective, and creates enough chaos to cover their escape. Dr. Sarah Williams, who had been extracted from Turkey just 12 hours earlier, looked up from the medical equipment she was preparing. The timing is critical. If we're going to fake Diane's death convincingly, the explosion needs to be real enough to fool forensic investigators, but controlled enough to ensure she survives. General Anderson entered the room carrying a secure tablet displaying real-time intelligence feeds. We have confirmation that the false flag operation in Erbil is moving forward as planned. Russian mercenaries have been inserted into the region under cover of a humanitarian aid convoy. The attack on the diplomatic compound is scheduled for tomorrow evening during the emergency summit meeting, which means we have less than 36 hours to get our undercover operative in position. Admiral Chun noted grimly. Diane had been listening to the planning discussions for hours, but the reality of what she was about to undertake was only now beginning to sink in. In less than 12 hours, everyone who knew her would believe she was dead. Her family would mourn her, her colleagues would attend her funeral, and she would disappear into a shadow world where a single mistake could mean actual death. There's something else we need to discuss, Reed said, pulling out a thick folder. Your new identity. Meet Elena Kozlov, arms dealer and information broker with connections throughout Eastern Europe and the Middle East. She has a reputation for selling to the highest bidder without asking questions about ideology or politics. Diane opened the folder and stared at photographs of a woman who looked remarkably similar to her, but with subtle differences: shorter hair, different eye color courtesy of contacts, and a small scar on her left cheek that would be added through minor surgery. The documentation was incredibly detailed: birth records from Moldova, education in Moscow, arrest records in Prague, and financial transactions that painted the picture of someone who had built a successful but morally flexible business. Asterisk Elena Kozlov disappeared 6 months ago, Reed continued. Officially, she's presumed dead after an arms deal went wrong in Bucharest. Unofficially, she's exactly the kind of person that the enemy network would want to recruit for their operations. Dr. Williams looked up from preparing what appeared to be blood bags and medical supplies. The transformation surgery will take about 4 hours. Nothing major, just enough to alter your facial structure slightly and add some distinguishing marks that match Elena's description. The real challenge will be mastering her background and mannerisms. I've studied the files, Diane replied. Elena Kozlov is cynical, mercenary, and trusts no one. She speaks 4 languages fluently and has a reputation for being ruthlessly pragmatic. Most importantly, she has the kind of connections that would make her valuable to a network trying to manipulate Western intelligence operations. Admiral Chun's secure phone buzzed with an urgent message. After reading it, her expression grew even more serious. We have a problem. Intelligence indicates that the enemy network has identified Dr. Williams as a key witness. They're planning to eliminate her before she can testify about the false intelligence operations. That's impossible, Dr. Williams protested. Only a handful of people know I'm here, and all of them have been security cleared. Which means we have another leak, General Anderson said grimly. Someone else in the intelligence community is working with the enemy network. Reed pulled out his secure communication device and began entering commands. I'm initiating a full security sweep of everyone who has knowledge of this operation, but that's going to take time we don't have. Then, we accelerate the timeline, Diane decided. If they know Dr. Williams is here, they'll move against her quickly. We need to fake my death and get me into position before they can eliminate the other witnesses. The surgery isn't complete, Dr. Williams began. Then we do it without the surgery, Diane interrupted. Elena Kozlov was known for being paranoid about her appearance. She could have had plastic surgery, changed her look, anything that would explain subtle differences from her old photographs. Admiral Chun considered the risks. Colonel, if you go undercover without proper preparation, without complete identity, documentation, you're essentially walking into enemy territory naked. Admiral, if I don't go undercover now, there won't be anyone left to testify about what we've discovered. The network is systematically eliminating witnesses, and they're not going to stop until everyone who can expose them is dead. Reed was already coordinating with his support team. I can have extraction vehicles in position within 2 hours. The car bomb will be real enough to fool forensic investigators, but Colonel Vargas will be extracted before the explosion through a tunnel. System we've had in place for exactly this kind of operation. What about the body? General Anderson asked. Forensic investigators will expect to find remains. We've prepared for that, Reed replied. Genetic material that will match Colonel Vargas's DNA, dental records that have been subtly altered. In military databases, and enough physical evidence to convince investigators that she died in the explosion. Dr. Williams packed her medical supplies with obvious reluctance. If we're doing this, I need to coach Diane on Elena Kozlov's medical history. Elena had a distinctive injury pattern from a grenade explosion in Chechnya, shrapnel scars on her left arm and back. I can create those scars with surgical precision, but it will have to be done quickly. Do it, Diane said without hesitation. The next several hours passed in a blur of preparation and identity construction. Dr. Williams worked to create Elena Kozlov's distinctive scars, while Reed briefed Diane on contact protocols and emergency procedures. Admiral Chun coordinated with intelligence agencies to ensure that Elena Kozlov's resurrection would be noticed by the right people in the international arms-dealing community. Remember, Reed emphasized as they made final preparations, Elena Kozlov trusts no one completely, but she's pragmatic enough to work with anyone who can pay her price. Your goal is to make contact with the enemy network by offering them something they need, intelligence about American military operations that they can use to plan future attacks. The irony being that I'll be feeding them false intelligence, while gathering real intelligence about their operations, Diane noted. Exactly, but you need to be careful. These people are professionals who have been manipulating intelligence operations for years. They'll test you, verify your claims, and eliminate you without hesitation if they suspect you're not who you claim to be. General Anderson received a final intelligence update. The car bomb team is moving into position. Colonel Vargas, this is your last chance to reconsider. Once this operation begins, there's no going back. Diane looked around the safe house at the people who were risking their careers and lives to expose the truth about American military operations. She thought about General Blackstone sitting in a military prison, about the refugees who had been saved from massacre, and about the diplomatic personnel who were still in danger from the planned false flag attack. I'm ready, she said simply. Reed handed her a small electronic device. Emergency beacon. If you're blown, activate this and we'll extract you if possible. But understand that once you're inserted into the enemy network, you'll be largely on your own, I understand. Admiral Chun approached her for what might be their final conversation. Colonel, I want you to know that regardless of what happens in this operation, what you've already accomplished has saved lives and exposed a conspiracy that threatened our national security. You've served your country with extraordinary courage. Thank you, Admiral. But the mission isn't complete until the network is destroyed and the threat to American personnel is eliminated. Dr. Williams finished the final medical preparations and stepped back to examine her work. Elena Kozlov, she said softly, try to stay alive long enough to come back to us. Reed checked his watch and nodded to his team. It's time. The car. Bomb team is in position and our extraction vehicles are ready. Colonel Vargas, in 30 minutes you'll officially be dead. Are you prepared for that? Diane thought about her family, her friends, her life as a military intelligence officer. In 30 minutes, all of that would disappear, replaced by the identity of a woman who dealt in death and deception. But if that's what it took to prevent more innocent people from dying, if that's what it took to protect American personnel from attack, then the sacrifice was worth it. I'm ready to die, she said, so that Elena Kozlov can live. The explosion shattered the pre-dawn silence of Arlington, Virginia, sending a column of fire and smoke spiraling into the gray morning sky. Emergency responders arrived within minutes to find the twisted wreckage of what had been Lieutenant Colonel Diane Vargas's Honda Accord, now a blackened crater in the Pentagon parking garage. The blast had been so intense that initial reports suggested no one could have survived. But 3 levels below, in a forgotten maintenance tunnel that dated back to the Cold War, the real Diane Vargas was very much alive. Her ears ringing from the carefully orchestrated explosion that had just erased her existence from the world. Above, CIA operative Marcus Reed helped her to her feet in the dimly lit tunnel, his face grim with the weight of what they had just accomplished. Congratulations, Colonel. You're officially dead. How does it feel? Diane touched the fresh bandages covering the surgical scars Dr. Williams had created to match Elena Kozlov's injury pattern. The pain was sharp and immediate, a constant reminder that she was no longer the person she had been just hours before. It feels like the easy part is over, she replied. Reed led her through a maze of tunnels that eventually emerged in the basement of a seemingly abandoned warehouse in southeast Washington. The facility was a CIA black site, one of dozens scattered throughout the metropolitan area for exactly this kind of operation. Inside, technicians were already monitoring news reports about the car bombing, tracking how the story was being reported, and ensuring that the official narrative held up under scrutiny. The forensic team will find enough genetic material to confirm your death, Reed explained as they walked through the facility. Dental records, DNA fragments, even traces of your uniform. By tomorrow morning, the military will be planning your funeral. Elena Kozlov's documentation was waiting for them in a secure briefing room. Passports from 3 different countries, bank accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands, and communication devices that would allow her to access the shadowy networks where arms dealers and information brokers conducted their business. Your first contact will be Viktor Petrov, Reed continued, sliding a photograph across the table. Russian intelligence operative, posing as a businessman in Istanbul. He's been identified as a key liaison between the enemy network and various criminal organizations throughout Eastern Europe. Diane studied the photograph, memorizing Petrov's features. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with intelligent eyes and the soft hands of someone who had spent more time behind desks than in combat zones. What's his connection to the false intelligence operation? Petrov has been recruiting assets throughout the region: arms dealers, smugglers, corrupt officials, anyone who can provide services to support the network's operations. Elena Kozlov's reputation and connections would make her extremely valuable to someone like Petrov. Reed activated a secure communication system that linked them to Admiral Chun and the Joint Chiefs. Despite the early hour, all the senior military leaders were assembled in the Pentagon's Crisis Management Center, coordinating. Elena, Admiral Chun's voice came through the encrypted channel. We've confirmed that the Erbil operation is proceeding as planned. Russian mercenaries have infiltrated the diplomatic security perimeter, and the false flag attack is scheduled for 1800 hours local time tomorrow. Diane felt the weight of urgency pressing down on her. She had less than 36 hours to make contact with the enemy network, gain their trust, and gather enough intelligence to prevent the massacre of 200 American diplomatic personnel. "What's my insertion method?" she asked Reed. "Arms." "Deal gone wrong," he replied, handing her a detailed briefing packet. Elena Kozlov surfaces in Istanbul, claiming to have escaped from her captors in Romania. She's desperate, paranoid, and looking for protection from the people who tried to kill her. Petrov will be intrigued by her survival and will want to recruit her for his operations. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Elena would approach Petrov through intermediaries, offering to sell information about American military operations in exchange for protection and a new identity. Her knowledge of Operation Desert Shield and the Blackstone conspiracy would make her invaluable to the network, especially since they believed Diane Vargas, the primary threat to their operations, was now dead. "There's one critical element," Admiral Chun continued. "We've received intelligence that the network is planning something beyond the Erbil attack. They're calling it the Damascus Protocol, and it appears to involve triggering a regional conflict that would justify massive Russian military intervention throughout the Middle East." Diane felt her blood chill. The conspiracy was even larger than she had imagined. "Admiral, are we talking about a plan to start a war?" "That's exactly what we're talking about, Elena. The false flag attack in Erbil is just the beginning. The network plans to use the American response to justify a series of escalating attacks throughout the region, each one designed to draw the United States deeper into conflicts that serve Russian strategic interests. General Anderson's voice joined the conversation. "The Damascus Protocol appears to involve simultaneous attacks on American, Turkish, and Israeli targets throughout Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. Each attack will be blamed on different terrorist organizations, but our intelligence suggests they're all being coordinated by the same network that has been manipulating our intelligence for years." The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. What had started as an investigation into a single failed military operation had uncovered a plot to reshape the entire geopolitical landscape of the Middle East through systematic deception and violence. "Elena, your mission parameters have changed," Admiral Chun announced. "Preventing the Erbil attack is still critical, but we need you to gather intelligence about the Damascus Protocol. If we can't stop the broader operation, we could be looking at a regional war that costs thousands of American lives." Reed was already updating Elena's documentation and cover story. "This actually works in our favor." Elena Kozlov's background includes arms deals throughout Syria and Lebanon. She would have exactly the kind of regional knowledge and connections that the network would need to implement the Damascus Protocol. Diane studied the updated briefing materials, absorbing details about Elena's supposed activities over the past several years. The fictional arms dealer had built relationships with everyone from Kurdish militias to Hezbollah operatives, creating a network of contacts that spanned the religious and political divisions of the Middle East. "The key is making them need you more than they suspect you," Reed emphasized. "Elena has to be valuable enough that they're willing to take risks to recruit her, but paranoid enough that she demands significant compensation and protection in return." Dr. Williams joined the conversation from her secure location, her voice carrying the strain of the past several days. There's something else you need to know about the Damascus Protocol. My sources suggest it's not just about triggering regional conflict. The network is planning to use the chaos to eliminate key American intelligence assets throughout the region, people who might be able to expose their operations. How many assets are we talking about? Diane asked. Dozens, Dr. Williams replied. Grimly. CIA operatives, military intelligence officers, diplomatic personnel, and anyone who has had access to information about the network's activities. They're planning a systematic purge that will leave American intelligence capabilities in the region completely compromised. The magnitude of the threat was overwhelming. The network wasn't just planning attacks, they were planning to destroy America's ability to operate effectively in one of the world's most strategically important regions. Elena, you need to understand something, Admiral Chun said, her voice heavy with the weight of command decisions. This operation has moved beyond intelligence gathering. If you can't find a way to disrupt the Damascus Protocol from within, we may have no choice but to launch preemptive military strikes against suspected network facilities, which would trigger exactly the kind of regional conflict they're trying to create, Diane realized. Exactly. They've constructed a scenario where any American response plays into their hands. The only way to stop them is to destroy their operation from within, without giving them the excuse they need to trigger broader conflicts. Reed checked his watch and began making final preparations for Elena's insertion into Turkey. Your flight leaves in 4 hours. Once you're in Istanbul, you'll have no backup, no extraction plan, and no way to communicate with us except through emergency protocols that could expose your identity if used incorrectly. I understand the risks, Diane replied, though the weight of isolation was already beginning to settle over her. She was about to enter a world where everyone around her would be a potential enemy, where a single mistake could mean not just her death, but the deaths of thousands of innocent people. There's one more thing, Reed said, handing her a small device that looked like an ordinary smartphone. This contains Elena Kozlov's complete digital identity, social media accounts, financial records, communication histories, but it also contains something else, a virus that will activate if you can get it connected to the network's communication systems. What kind of virus? The kind that will allow our cyber warfare specialists to trace every communication, identify every member of the network, and potentially shut down their operations remotely. But you'll have to get close enough to their core systems to install it, which means gaining their complete trust. Diane pocketed the device, understanding that it represented both her greatest weapon and her greatest vulnerability. If the network discovered the virus, they would know immediately that Elena Kozlov was not who she claimed to be. Elena, Admiral. Chun's voice carried a note of finality. You're about to undertake one of the most dangerous intelligence operations in American history. The success or failure of your mission could determine whether we prevent a regional war or find ourselves fighting one. Do you have any final questions? Diane looked around the secure facility, knowing that this might be the last time she spoke with anyone who knew her real identity. When she emerged from this building, she would be Elena Kozlov completely, with no safety net and no guarantee that she would ever be able to return to her former life. Just one question, Admiral. When this is over, how will I know if I've succeeded? Simple, Admiral Chun replied. If the Damascus Protocol fails, if the network is destroyed, and if innocent people are protected from the violence they're planning, then you'll have succeeded. And Elena Kozlov will finally be able to rest. Reed handed her Elena's passport and travel documents. It's time to go. Viktor Petrov is expecting a mysterious arms dealer to contact him about a business proposition. Don't keep him waiting. As Diane walked toward the exit that would take her to her new life as Elena Kozlov, she thought about the 18 civilians who had died at Al-Rashid, the 300 refugees who had been saved from massacre, and the 200 American diplomatic personnel whose lives now depended on her ability to infiltrate and destroy the network that, threatened them, the woman who had challenged a four-star general and exposed his conspiracy was dead. But from her ashes had risen someone who would infiltrate the enemy's most secret operations and ensure that their plans for regional war would never come to fruition. Elena Kozlov was about to enter the most dangerous game of her life, and the stakes had never been higher. The Turkish Airlines flight descended through thick clouds over Istanbul's Ataturk airport, and Elena Kozlov pressed her face to the small window, watching the sprawling metropolis emerge from the gray morning mist. The city straddled two continents, a perfect metaphor for the dual life she was about to live caught between her true identity as an American intelligence officer and her fabricated existence as a ruthless arms dealer. The passport control officer barely glanced at Elena's Moldovan documents before stamping her entry. To him, she was just another Eastern European businesswoman visiting Turkey's commercial capital. He had no idea that the woman standing before him carried intelligence that could prevent a war or trigger one, depending on how successfully she could infiltrate the most dangerous criminal network in the region. Elena's first stop was a modest hotel in the Beyoğlu district, chosen specifically because its clientele consisted mainly of business travelers who minded their own affairs. She checked in using cash and a credit card linked to one of Elena Kozlov's shell companies, then spent the first hour meticulously examining her room for surveillance devices. Finding none, she activated the secure smartphone Reed had given her and began the delicate process of re-establishing Elena's digital presence. The arms dealer's social media accounts came back to life with carefully crafted posts, suggesting she had recently escaped from a dangerous situation in Romania. Her financial accounts showed transactions that painted the picture of someone liquidating assets quickly and relocating to Turkey for safety. Most importantly, her encrypted communications began reaching out to contacts throughout the regional arms dealing community, subtly indicating that Elena Kozlov was alive, in need of protection, and willing to pay handsomely for it. Within 6 hours, the responses began arriving. Arms dealers, smugglers, and fixers throughout the region confirmed that they had heard rumors of Elena's death and were surprised to learn she had survived. But it was the message from Viktor Petrov that Elena had been waiting for. Ms. Kozlov. The encrypted text read, "I am pleased to learn of your continued good health despite recent difficulties. I represent certain business interests that might be able to provide the security you require, in exchange for services you are uniquely qualified to provide. Would you be interested in discussing a mutually beneficial arrangement?" Elena stared at the message, knowing that her response would determine whether she gained access to the network or ended up dead in a Turkish alley. She had studied Petrov's psychological profile extensively. He was cautious, paranoid, and utterly ruthless, but he was also pragmatic enough to recognize valuable assets when he saw them. Her response was crafted to appeal to his mercenary instincts, while maintaining Elena's reputation for paranoid caution. "Mr. Petrov, I am aware of your reputation and would be interested in discussing business arrangements with serious parties. However, given recent attempts on my life, I require assurances of security before any face-to-face meetings. I have information about American military operations that certain parties would find extremely valuable, but I will only share such information with principals who can guarantee my safety." Petrov's response came within an hour, suggesting a meeting at the Grand Bazaar the following afternoon. The location was perfect from a security perspective. Thousands of tourists and locals moving through a maze of narrow corridors, making surveillance difficult and providing multiple escape routes. It was exactly the kind of venue that someone with Elena's background would choose for a first meeting with potentially dangerous business partners. That evening, Elena received an encrypted message that made her blood run cold. It wasn't from Petrov or anyone in the arms-dealing community. It was from an anonymous source who claimed to have information about the Damascus Protocol. Alina Kozlov, the message read. I know who you really are, and I know why you're here. The network you're trying to infiltrate has been expecting you. They know about this staged death. They know about your real identity, and they're planning to use you to feed false information back to American intelligence. Meet me tonight at midnight at the Galata Bridge if you want to survive the next 24 hours. Alina's hands shook as she read the message. If the network knew her real identity, then her mission was not only compromised, it was a trap designed to manipulate American intelligence from within. But the message could also be a trap itself, designed to lure her into a vulnerable position where she could be eliminated or captured. She had no way to verify the source of the message, no backup to call for assistance, and no way to abort the mission without potentially dooming the diplomatic personnel in Erbil. Her training told her to treat the message as a trap, but her instincts suggested that someone within the network was trying to warn her about an even deeper level of deception. Alina spent the next several hours preparing for multiple contingencies. She created dead-drop locations throughout the city where she could leave intelligence for potential extraction teams. She memorized escape routes from the Grand Bazaar and identified safe houses where she could hide if the situation deteriorated. Most importantly, she prepared a final message to be transmitted to Admiral Chun if she was captured or killed. Summarizing everything she had learned about the Damascus Protocol. At 11:45 p.m., Alina made her way through the darkened streets of Istanbul toward the Galata Bridge. The ancient span crossed the Golden Horn, connecting the old city with the modern commercial district, and at midnight it would be populated mainly by fishermen and late-night travelers. If someone wanted to meet her without being observed, it was an ideal location. She arrived at the bridge 10 minutes early and positioned herself where she could observe approaches from both directions. The message had specified the exact center of the bridge, where the noise from traffic below would make electronic surveillance difficult. As midnight approached, Alina felt every nerve in her body on high alert. The man who approached her was not what she had expected. Instead of a rough criminal or intelligence operative, she saw a well-dressed gentleman in his 60s, walking with a slight limp and carrying an umbrella despite the clear night sky. He looked more like a retired professor than someone involved in international espionage. Ms. Kozlov, he said quietly as he reached her position, or should I say, Lieutenant Colonel Vargas. Alina's hand moved instinctively toward the concealed weapon in her jacket, but the man raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. Please, I am not your enemy. My name is Professor Dmitry Volkov, and until 6 months ago, I was one of the architects of the operation you are trying to infiltrate. Why should I trust you? Alina demanded, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I am the one who exposed Asset Bravo 7 as compromised, Volkov replied. I tried to warn American intelligence that the source was feeding false information. But my warnings were ignored by certain officials who were already working with the network. Alina studied the man's face in the dim light from the bridge lamps. There was something in his eyes that suggested profound regret, the look of someone who had seen too much and carried the weight of terrible knowledge. Professor, if what you're saying is true, then you know about General Blackstone's involvement in the conspiracy. General Blackstone was a useful idiot, Volkov said with obvious contempt. He thought he was being clever, taking payments to provide intelligence that would advance his career. He had no idea that he was being used as part of a much larger operation to destabilize American military effectiveness throughout the region. Then who is really behind the Damascus Protocol? Volkov glanced around nervously before responding. The operation is being coordinated by a joint task force of Russian military intelligence and Iranian Revolutionary Guard operatives. But the real architect is someone you've never heard of, Colonel Alexei Morozov, former Spetsnaz commander, who has been building criminal networks throughout the Middle East for over a decade. Alina felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Morozov is using the criminal networks to stage attacks that will be blamed on terrorist organizations. Exactly. But the Damascus Protocol goes beyond simple false flag operations. Morozov has recruited assets within American, Turkish, and Israeli intelligence services. When the attacks begin, these assets will provide intelligence that confirms the official narrative while concealing Russian and Iranian involvement. Professor, why are you telling me this? If you were part of the operation, why risk your life to warn me? Volkov's expression darkened. Because I discovered what Morozov really plans to do. The Damascus Protocol isn't just about regional destabilization. It's about triggering a conflict that will justify the use of tactical nuclear weapons. Morozov believes that a limited nuclear exchange in the Middle East will demonstrate Russian military superiority while creating chaos that Russia can exploit globally. Elena felt the world spin around her. The conspiracy was even more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Professor, how much time do we have? The Erbil attack is just the beginning. If it succeeds, Morozov will trigger the next phase within 72 hours. By the end of the week, we could be looking at nuclear weapons being used in populated areas for the first time since World War II. Then we have to stop Petrov's meeting tomorrow. If the network knows my real identity, the network doesn't. Know your real identity, Volkov interrupted. But Morozov suspects that American intelligence is trying to infiltrate his operation. He's using Petrov to test you. If you pass his tests, you'll be brought into the inner circle where you can gather the intelligence needed to stop the Damascus Protocol. And if I fail his tests, then Alina Kozlov will disappear permanently, and Diane Vargas will never see her family again. Volkov handed her a small device that looked like an ordinary smartphone charger. This contains the real-time locations of all the nuclear devices that Morozov has positioned throughout the region. If you can get it connected to Petrov's communication system, American intelligence will be able to track and neutralize the weapons before they can be used. Elena pocketed the device, understanding that she was now carrying information that could prevent nuclear war or ensure it, depending on whether she could successfully deceive some of the most dangerous people in the world. Professor, how do I know you're really trying to help me? How do I know this isn't just another layer of deception? Volkov pulled out a photograph of a young woman and handed it to Elena. This is my daughter, Katerina. She is a doctor working with Médecins Sans Frontières in Aleppo. She will be directly in the path of the first nuclear device if the Damascus Protocol succeeds. I am not trying to save the world, Ms. Vargas. I am trying to save my daughter. Alina looked at the photograph, seeing in the young woman's face the same intelligence and determination that she recognized in her father's eyes. It was the kind of personal motivation that couldn't be faked, the kind of desperation that drove people to risk everything for the chance to protect someone they loved. Professor, if I do this, if I go through with meeting Petrov and try to infiltrate Morozov's operation, what guarantee do I have that you'll be able to help me when things go wrong? None, Volkov replied honestly. But you have my word that I will do everything in my power to ensure that the Damascus Protocol fails, even if it costs me my life. As Alina walked back through the darkened streets of Istanbul, she realized that her mission had evolved again. She was no longer just trying to prevent attacks on American personnel or gather intelligence about enemy operations. She was now carrying the responsibility for preventing nuclear weapons from being used in one of the world's most populated regions. The meeting with Viktor Petrov was less than 12 hours away, and Alina Kozlov was about to enter the most dangerous phase of the most critical intelligence operation of her lifetime. The Grand Bazaar pulsed with the chaotic energy of 4,000 shops, crammed into a labyrinth of vaulted corridors that had witnessed centuries of commerce, conspiracy, and betrayal. Alina Kozlov moved through the crowds like a predator in familiar territory, her senses alert for any sign of surveillance or trap. The meeting with Viktor Petrov was scheduled for 2 p.m. at a carpet shop in the bazaar's deepest section. and she had arrived an hour early to study the terrain. The shop, Anatolian Treasures, was tucked between a spice merchant and a jewelry vendor, its entrance barely visible behind hanging carpets that created a natural screen from prying eyes. Elena positioned herself at a tea stand across the narrow corridor, sipping Turkish coffee while observing the patterns of foot traffic and identifying potential escape routes. At exactly 2 p.m., a stocky man in expensive suit entered the carpet shop. Viktor Petrov moved with the careful precision of someone who had survived decades in a profession where carelessness meant death. Elena waited another 5 minutes, ensuring no surveillance teams had followed him, before approaching the shop herself. The interior was dimly lit, filled with the rich scent of wool and ancient traditions. Petrov stood alone among hanging carpets that created intimate conversation spaces, invisible from the entrance. He was examining a particularly ornate Persian rug, his back to Elena as she entered. "Neskozlov," he said without turning around, his Russian accent thick but his English precise. "You are punctual. In my business, this is either a sign of professionalism or desperation. Which is it?" "Both," Elena replied, allowing a note of controlled anxiety to enter her voice. "Desperate people can be very professional when their lives depend on it." Petrov turned to face her, his pale blue eyes studying every detail of her appearance. Elena had spent hours that morning ensuring her look matched Elena Kozlov's profile, the subtle makeup that couldn't quite hide old bruises, clothing expensive enough to suggest success, but wrinkled enough to indicate recent stress, and posture that conveyed confidence undercut by genuine fear. "You claim to have information about American military operations," Petrov said, settling into a chair hidden among the carpets. "In my experience, such claims usually come from people who have more desperation than actual intelligence." Elena reached into her jacket, moving slowly to avoid triggering any defensive reactions, and pulled out a manila folder. Operation Thunder. Strike, Iraq, 2023. Operation Silent Arrow, Afghanistan, 2024. Operation Desert Shield, Syria, 2024. Would you like me to continue? Petrov's expression shifted slightly, the first crack in his professional composure. Those operation names were classified at the highest levels of American military intelligence. For Elena to know them, she would have to have access to information that very few people possessed. "Anyone can recite operation names," Petrov said, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "What makes you think this information has value?" Elena opened the folder and slid a photograph across the small table between them. It showed the aftermath of the Al-Rashid village attack, with medical personnel treating civilian casualties. "Because I know why these operations failed, who made them fail, and how the same methods are being used to manipulate American intelligence right now." Petrov studied the photograph, his expression unreadable. Elena knew she was walking a tightrope. She needed to demonstrate knowledge that would make her valuable to the network, while not revealing so much that Petrov would realize she was an intelligence operative rather than an arms dealer who had stumbled onto classified information. "Let us assume, hypothetically, that you have access to such information," Petrov said carefully. "What would you expect in return for sharing it?" "Protection. First and foremost," Elena replied immediately. "The people who tried to kill me in Romania know that I have this information. They will keep trying until they succeed, unless I find allies who are powerful enough to discourage them. And second, money, enough to disappear permanently and establish a new identity in a place where old enemies cannot find me." Petrov nodded. "Slowly, reasonable requests. But you must understand that my associates are very cautious about new partnerships. They will want to verify both your information and your motivations before making any commitments." Elena had expected this response. Intelligence networks didn't survive by trusting strangers, regardless of what information they claimed to possess. "What kind of verification are we talking about?" A demonstration of good faith, Petrov replied. You will provide us with specific intelligence about an upcoming American military operation. If that intelligence proves accurate and actionable, we will consider a more comprehensive arrangement. Elena's heart raced. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the opportunity to feed false intelligence to the network while gaining access to their operations. But it was also the moment of greatest danger, because one mistake in her response could expose her true identity. I can give you the operational details for an American intelligence gathering mission scheduled for tomorrow night in northern Syria, Elena said, pulling information from a fictional operation that Reed had helped her construct. Satellite reconnaissance of suspected weapons facilities near the Turkish border. Times, coordinates, communication frequencies, everything you would need to either avoid detection or arrange a surprise for the reconnaissance team. Petrov's eyes narrowed. You would betray American military personnel? Mr. Petrov, the Americans have already betrayed me. They used my network to conduct operations that resulted in civilian casualties, then tried to eliminate me when I became inconvenient. I have no loyalty to people who consider me expendable. The bitterness in Elena's voice was genuine, drawn from Diane's own feelings about how the military had initially tried to suppress her investigation into Operation Desert Shield. Petrov seemed to recognize the authenticity of her anger. Very well, Petrov said after a long pause. Provide me with the operational details, and we will verify their accuracy. If the information proves valuable, you will be contacted about more substantial arrangements. Elena spent the next 30 minutes providing carefully crafted intelligence about the fictional operation, including just enough realistic details to make it credible, while ensuring that any attempts to verify the information would lead the network in directions that American intelligence wanted them to go. As the meeting concluded, Petrov handed her a secure communication device. Use this only for emergency contact. My associates prefer to conduct business through intermediaries, but if you find yourself in immediate danger, this will reach people who can provide assistance. Elena pocketed the device, recognizing it as the key to her infiltration of the Kolkata network's communication systems. Once she could connect Professor Volkov's tracking device to their network, American intelligence would be able to monitor all of their operations and locate the nuclear weapons that threatened the region. Mr. Petrov, Elena said as they prepared to leave the shop, how long before I hear from your associates? If your information proves accurate, within 24 hours. If it proves false... Petrov shrugged with Eastern European fatalism. Then you will not hear from anyone ever again. As Elena made her way back through the Grand Bazaar, she activated the secure smartphone Reed had given her and sent a coded message indicating that initial contact had been successful. But she also knew that the most dangerous phase of her mission was just beginning. The network would now be actively investigating Elena Kozlov's background, verifying her claims, and testing her loyalty. That evening, Elena received an encrypted message from Professor Volkov that made her blood run cold. Morozov has moved up the timeline. The Erbil attack has been rescheduled for tonight. The Damascus Protocol begins in 6 hours. Elena realized that while she had been focused on infiltrating the network, the conspiracy had accelerated beyond anyone's expectations. The diplomatic personnel in Erbil were about to be attacked, and she was the only person in position to prevent it. She immediately activated the emergency communication protocol Reed had established, sending a flash message to Admiral Chun. Urgent. Erbil attack tonight. Network operational timeline accelerated. Require immediate intervention to protect diplomatic personnel. The response came within minutes. Message received. Military assets being repositioned. Continue mission. The nuclear threat takes priority over everything else. Elena stared at the message, understanding its implications. The military leadership had made the coldest possible calculation. The lives of 200 diplomatic personnel were acceptable losses if it meant preventing nuclear weapons from being used against millions of civilians throughout the region. As sirens began wailing across Istanbul and news reports started covering an incident at the American diplomatic compound in Erbil, Elena knew that the first phase of the Damascus Protocol had succeeded. The false flag attack would now provide justification for the escalating series of conflicts that Morozov had planned. Her secure phone buzzed with a message from Petrov. "Your intelligence was accurate. My associates are impressed. You will be contacted shortly about expanded cooperation." Elena felt sick. The fictional intelligence operation she had described had apparently provided cover for the real attack in Erbil. The network had used her information to coordinate their timeline and ensure that American intelligence was looking in the wrong direction when the Aviaco timeline attack occurred. But there was no time for self-recrimination. Elena activated Professor Volkov's tracking device and connected it to Petrov's communication system, uploading the virus that would allow American cyber warfare specialists to trace the network's operations and locate the nuclear weapons. As data began flowing from the device, Elena realized she was looking at the locations of tactical nuclear weapons positioned throughout Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Turkey. 12 devices, each capable of destroying an entire city block, hidden in populated areas where their use would maximize civilian casualties. The upload was nearly complete when her secure phone rang with an incoming call from an unknown number. Elena answered cautiously. "Ms. Kozlov," a voice said in accented English. "This is Colonel Alexei Morozov. I understand you have been quite helpful to our operations. I would very much like to meet with you personally to discuss how we might work together more. Extensively." Elena's heart stopped. She was about to come face to face with the architect of the Damascus Protocol, the man who was planning to trigger nuclear warfare in the Middle East. But she was also about to gain access to the highest levels of the conspiracy, access that might allow her to prevent the catastrophe that was now just hours away. "Colonel Morozov," Elena replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I would be honored to meet with you. When and where?" "Tonight, Ms. Kozlov, and please bring your passport. We will be traveling to a facility where you can see firsthand the scope of the operations you will be supporting." As Elena prepared for what might be the final phase of her mission, she realized that she was about to enter the heart of the most dangerous conspiracy in modern history. The woman who had started by investigating a routine military operation was now the only person in position to prevent nuclear weapons from being used for the first time since World War II. The upload completed, transmitting the locations of all 12 nuclear devices to American intelligence. Elena destroyed the tracking device and prepared to meet the man who held the power to reshape the world through fire and radiation. Elena Kozlov was about to face Colonel Alexei Morozov, and the fate of millions hung in the balance of their conversation. Final gambit was about to begin. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.